The sky above the summer sea was the color of freshly spilled wine, dark, bruised and veined with deeper strands of purple that bled into indigo as the last sliver of sun fled the horizon. Drogon's wings beat a heavy cadence against that twilight canvas, each downstroke rocking vast currents of air across the sky. In his foreclaws he bore the lifeless body of Daenerys Stormborn Targaryen, mother of dragons, breaker of chains, the only rider he had ever known. Wind howled through cracked towers of ruined old Valyria beneath him, keening like a ghost choir in lament. The dragon, for all his vastness, for all his black firepower, released only a single musical rumble. A note that might have been mourning, or might have been a challenge to any god who dared listen. He circled once, twice, the enormous shadow of his wingspan unfurling across molten rivers that still glimmered in the fissures of Valyria's shattered earth. These channels of living fire were the scars left by the doom. Eruptions so cataclysmic that even centuries later the land smoked as though the disaster had raged only yesterday. Ash lifted in Drogon's slipstream, spiraling like pale spirits seeking purchase in the sky. At last he folded his wings and dropped toward a half-collapsed mosaic courtyard, its crimson and gold tiles spider-webbed with fracture lines. His talons struck shattered marble and sent up plumes of dust. For a heartbeat he crouched over Daenerys, as though the rhythm of his own gargantuan heart might coax some spark of life back into her slender frame. But her body lay limp against the stone. Silver gold hair fanned like silk in the dust. Eyes forever closed. Drogon nudged her with the tip of his snout. When she did not stir, he drew back and loosed a breath of black-red flame toward the heavens. An involuntary spasm of grief that bent the air with heat and lit the ruins in stark, flickering gold. Stone dragons carved 200 years before Aegon's conquest seemed to leap from their plinths in the sudden glare, their obsidian eyes glinting with reflected fire. The torrent roared for long moments before tapering into crackling embers that drifted earthward. Night settled fully then, the kind of night that smothered sound itself. Drogon curled his great bulk around the pale corpse, guarding her with a vigilance older than kings. Far below, at the edge of memory, he sensed strange creatures stirring in ruined galleries and caves. Half-stone men cursed by grayscale who gibbered at the sight of living flesh. Orphaned wyverns whose leathery wings rustled like parchment. Shadows of the doom that knew no name nor mercy. They kept their distance, cowed by the furnace heat radiating from his haunches. Hours passed. Somewhere to the east, a low thunder rolled from the smoking sea. But no lightning followed. The noise returned, steadier, a vast tectonic growl that rose through the foundations of Valyria itself. Drogon lifted his head. Beneath fractured flagstones, warmth pulsed, rhythmic as a slow heartbeat. Lava channels shifted, breathing upward against the crust. And in the hidden vaults of mountains, hollowed by ancient dragon lords, dormant for centuries, older magics trembled toward wakefulness. The pulse drew Drogon's attention to a half-buried archway at the courtyard's far edge. The arch was carved in the likeness of two dragons entwined tail to tail, their sinuous bodies meeting at the keystone. A three-headed dragon wrought from hammered Valyrian steel, still gleaming though centuries had passed. From that mouth gushed a breath of warm, sulfur-tinged air. Drogon's pupils narrowed to slits. He craned his neck, nostrils flaring, tasting the trace odors hidden in that breath. Brimstone, salt, and something else. Something living. He looked once more at his rider. No mortal breath would ever fill those lungs again. Yet Drogon's own heart surged against his ribs. Life had fled Daenerys, but it clung stubbornly elsewhere in this doomed land. Clung, called, beckoned. Slowly, reluctantly, he uncoiled from her side. The courtyard seemed to groan under the release of his weight. He bent his head a final time, long forked tongue sliding over her sun-cooled skin as gently as an affectionate cat. With a voiceless promise vibrating in the back of his throat, he turned and moved toward the arch. His claws touched cracked steps that descended into blackness. A hiss rose, a challenge, but no creature emerged. Flame guttered along Drogon's teeth as he snarled a warning, the glow-lighting walls muraled with impossible beasts. Dragons with 12 wings, serpents crowned with temples, pale leviathans whose talons straddled oceans. As he descended, the murals seemed to move beneath the flicker of his flame. Or perhaps it was the axis of time itself bending in these cursed tunnels. Heat intensified. Pebbles sizzled beneath Drogon's pads. Droplets of sweat rolled along the armored ridges of his belly scales. He sensed it then. Not merely heat, but heartbeat, soft as a whisper, yet undeniable. Ahead, the tunnel widened into a vast cavern whose ceiling was lost beyond columns of rising steam. Rivers of magma traced glowing veins across the floor, separated by narrow outcroppings of obsidian that formed an accidental path toward the cavern's center. There, amid a bowl of black glass cooled by exposure to air ages ago, lay 5 eggs. They were smaller than those Drogon had known in Qarth's menagerie, or those that hatched him and his brothers. Yet they pulsed like dark rubies, each one latticed with hair-thin fractures that glowed from within, as though living fire stirred beneath their shells. The cavern's molten light reflected across their surfaces, sending blood-red shimmer along the walls. Drogon approached. The heat from the eggs pressed against his snout, as intimate as breath against flesh. He inhaled. The resonance was unmistakable. A shared signature woven in flame and scale and sky. They were his. How could that be? He had never mated. Rhaegal and Viserion were gone. The skies of Essos held no other of his kind. And yet the eggs awaited him, humming with a life that answered his own. Drogon lowered his head until one scaled ridge touched the nearest shell. A burst of memory sluiced through him. Bright fields of grass south of Qarth. Skies above Meereen where he wheeled in triumph. Nights spiraling through storm clouds while Daenerys clung to his back and laughed. In every flash, heat built beneath his heart until he could scarcely contain it. The memory shattered in a rush of fire that burst from his throat, cascading over the eggs in a gentle wash. The shells drank the flame greedily, glowing brighter. Across the river of magma, the cavern walls tremored. Shards of obsidian cracked loose and fell sizzling into molten rock. A cascade of steam hissed upward like applause. Above, currents upheaved pockets of trapped gas, lighting entire strata of the ceiling in sudden orange blossom. Drogon folded his wings tight, guarding the eggs from debris. When calm returned, the glow within each shell pulsed stronger, more insistent, matching the rhythm of his own breath. Hours passed, or perhaps moments. Time had lost purchase. Drogon lay coiled around the clutch, eyes half-lidded, lids transparent enough that emberlight refracted through them in streaks of molten gold. The eggs sang to him in silence, a choir of wordless promise. Sky, wind, hunt, flame. Their songs spun through his bones until his own blood answered, vibrating in lockstep. He did not notice when the ceiling calmed, when steam thinned, when the river of lava slowed like thick honey upon cooling stone. He slipped instead into a dream of flight so vivid he could taste the rarefied air above storms. Days crawled by. Above ground, storms pummeled Valyria's coasts, churning waters into froth against shattered piers. Deep in the cavern, Drogon hunted in brief, savage forays, returning with wyverns whose bones he crushed upon landing, or with the limp bodies of half-stone men who had wandered too close. Their ashes fed his furnace. Their heat seeped outward to the eggs. All the while he listened, poised for the subtle moment when crack met air. It came first as a pinprick. In the large central egg, a hairline seam widened with an almost inaudible snap. Drogon reared his head, pupils contracting to narrow shards. Another snap. Then another. The shell fractured, triangles of gemstone peeling outward. Through the opening pressed a snout no larger than a stag's antler, shimmering black with wet birth membrane. The hatchling mewled. Soft, raw, insistent. Drogon's answering rumble filled the cavern. One after another, the remaining eggs cracked open, shedding shards like petals. 4 hatchlings emerged, 2 glossy obsidian, 1 shimmering crimson, 1 a pale silver streaked with gold veins. Each shook slick wings that spread like damp parchment. Their eyes, though barely opened, reflected the furnace light with a keen hunger older than speech. They tumbled together, shrieking tiny flares of flame that guttered a foot beyond their tongues. Drogon extended his neck until his snout nearly brushed the clutch. The black hatchling crawled upward, talons scraping his scale ridges, and perched upon his muzzle. Drogon remained motionless, lest a twitch send the fledgling tumbling into lava. A father, and yet more than father. These were parts of him, formed from marrow, memory, and ash, birthed by forces he could not name. They nipped playfully at his teeth, testing strength. Each spark they coughed brighter than the one before. Minutes or hours, again the world was all heartbeats. Passed while Drogon supervised their rough play. Eventually hunger, that ancient tyrant, tightened its claws around the newborns. Their cries sharpened, and Drogon rose, gathering them to his chest between forelegs. He launched upward in a spiral that battered steam apart, his wings carving smoky vortices. Once above the archway, he gained the courtyard with a crash of loose stones. Moonlight painted the ruins argent, softer than the molten glow below, yet bright enough that sea cliffs glistened in the distance. Drogon sniffed the patterns of wind. Salt, distant rainfall, the leathery scent of wyvern flocks. He chose a direction and sprang into flight. Hatchlings clutched against his breast, wings unfurling like thunderheads. They hunted by night. Drogon stooped upon a wyvern pack skimming just above whitecaps, scattering them with an explosion of fire that turned the sea briefly into a sunlit mirror. He tore one creature in half with jaws of steel, shook another until bones popped, dropped their shattered remains upon volcanic sand. The hatchlings fell upon flesh, squealing, frenzied. Their small teeth found marrow. Their tongues lapped blood. Drogon watched, nostrils flared with pride. Each gulp of life they swallowed pumped vigor into nascent muscles, lengthening wings by fractions, brightening scale luster. In the east, dawn loomed pale behind a scrim of cloud. Drogon gathered the satiated young and turned inland. He landed upon a cracked promontory where a colonnade still jutted skyward, its marble pillars streaked black by centuries of smoke. There he rested. Hatchlings sprawled atop his forelimbs, bellies distended. A breeze smelling faintly of cinnamon slipped across the plateau, an echo of trade winds that once bore spices from Valyria's slave markets. It carried too a whiff of something unnatural. Old sorcery, half dormant, awake now that blood of dragon flooded the air. Deep within a submerged library whose mosaic floors depicted the dune's first sparks, a quill stirred atop a bronze lectern though no hand guided it. Rot-eaten scrolls fanned outward, fluttering despite the absence of wind. The quill scratched across lambskin parchment, ink welling from its split tip, forming sigils that glowed for an instant before sinking into the page. The blood returns. Flame begets flame. The world remakes its chains. The quill paused, hovered, resumed writing. Be wary, child of night, for where dragons rise, doom follows in their wake. Across Valyria, relics answered that spectral call. Brazier coals, extinguished for 300 years, smoldered. Carved obsidian faces blinked living embers in dead eyes. Vault doors, sealed since the doom, shivered in their hinges. A harmonic tremor rolled through foundations, subtle but gathering with each heartbeat of newly hatched life. The days tumbled forward like dice across a tavern table. Drogon guided his children, 3 daughters and 2 sons, through ash-choked valleys where fissures spat steam in rhythmic pulses, across obsidian plains where sunbeams shattered into a million splinters of light. He taught them to ride thermals, to sense the shift in atmospheric pressure that signaled a coming squall, to cuff each other playfully without splintering bone. He corrected them with swatting tail or snapping jaw when they ventured too near stone men enclaves. Fire was a language they all spoke instinctively, yet its grammar required finesse. So he demonstrated, unleashing gouts that twisted in mid-air, shaping wreaths of flame into serpents that chased their tails before crumpling into sparks. The hatchlings shrieked in delight and tried to mimic him, their own blasts stuttering but fierce. They grew at astonishing pace. In a fortnight, wingspans doubled. By the moon's next waning, the eldest daughter could glide unassisted for half a league. The earth itself seemed to feed them. currents of latent magic coursing up through caldera vents, saturating scale and sinew. Drogon felt it too, a resurgence of vigor he had not known since youth. The tear in his left membrane, earned fighting the scorpion bolts outside Meereen, knit slowly, the scar tissue hardening into almost seamless black. Yet with growth came curiosity, and with curiosity came danger. One twilight, the smallest sun, silver-gilded fleet of wing, broke formation to chase a flickering orange light near the ruins of a temple. He banked too sharply, tumbled against jagged rocks, and vanished into a crevasse that breathed sulphurous exhalations. Drogon roared, calling him back. The echo returned empty. Wings thrumming thunder, Drogon plunged. The crevasse opened into a labyrinth of narrow passages, aglow with blue fire. Strange glyphs shimmered on walls slick with condensation. Ahead, the hatchling's squeal snapped short. Drogon braced, talons scoring stone, flame boiling in his throat to light the claustrophobic dark. The tunnel resolved into a vault, whose centerpiece was a triangular obelisk cut from weeping black glass. Sigils threaded its surface, forming shifting constellations that rotated slow as planets. At its base, the silver hatchling lay immobilized, limbs splayed in a geometric pattern, eyes wide open yet unblinking. A ring of bronze rose around the obelisk, etched with Valyrian glyphs that pulsed violet. As Drogon stepped across the threshold, a shiver rippled through him. Raw antipathy, like ice water dashed against a forge. The bronze ring flared. The hatchling struggled, scales clinking like shaken coins, but some unseen tether pinned him. Drogon struck. His firestorm hammered the obelisk in waves, heat so intense the vault's air bubbled. Black glass glowed white. The bronze ring melted, pooling into a seething moat. With a coughing shriek, the spell shattered. The hatchling scrambled free, but not before a single tendril of violet light lanced from the obelisk point to lick his chest. Silver scales charred instantly, leaving a smoldering brand shaped like an open eye. Drogon herded the trembling youngling back the way they'd come, never turning his gaze from the obelisk until shadows swallowed it. When at last they burst into open air, night wind cut the oppressive heat. The other hatchlings woofed anxious greetings, clustering around their wounded brother. Drogon crouched, wings mantling them all. Steam rose from the brand upon the silver hatchling. It did not bleed, yet neither did it cool. From a distant spire of basalt came an answering rumble, a voice forged of grinding stone. It was not wyvern nor dragon. The land itself spoke, deep and dispassionate. Drogon felt the sound in his skull. He responded with a roar raw as flayed steel, then shepherded his children skyward. He chose a new lair, a volcanic caldera whose rim collapsed only on the northern arc where wind could funnel smoke away. The bowl's interior was graced by terraces of luminous crystal, each platform broad enough to host a dozen dragons full-grown. Here, steam vents warmed the night but did not stifle. Lakes of rainwater gathered in caldera pockets, pure enough to drink. Drogon's instinct told him this place was strong in old power, but untainted by the sorceries that had nearly claimed his son. Days melted into weeks. The hatchlings hardened into adolescence. Their wings lost translucence, grew slick and iron-hard, studded with ridges for maneuvering. Scales across shoulder joints thickened into natural plate, a gift of Valyria's saturating essence. Their breaths lengthened into sustained jets of cerulean flame that bent metal. Even the wounded silver sun recovered, though the eye-shaped brand never faded. Rather, veins of blue crystal spider-webbed outward from the mark, like frost upon glass. One morning before dawn, the branded sun startled his siblings by vomiting smoke, laced with glimmering shards, fragments of the very crystal that lined the caldera's terraces. Drogon recognized magic's signature. It coursed within the boy. Whether boon or bane, he could not yet divine. That night, the silver dragon dreamt. Though Drogon could not share the dream, he sensed its weight, tumult enough to wake him from deep torpor. The hatchling, no, the adolescent now, rose unsteadily and climbed the caldera wall. Drogon followed. Above, Moons clung to the ragged clouds like lamps behind frosted glass. At the rim, the silver dragon unfurled wings, muscles trembling. He leapt, soaring beyond the caldera, and vanished from Drogon's inner sense before the father could launch in pursuit. Drogon brayed a warning that cracked stone. The remaining four stirred, confusion slurring into fear. He commanded them to remain, then vaulted skyward, a streak of umbral fury. He found the trail within minutes, a faint shimmer where currents of unseen power scythed the atmosphere, as though the Silver One had burst through a membrane separating worlds. Drogon pursued, wings pistoning, senses splayed wide. The shimmer thickened, became a funnel of barely visible distortion that terminated at a throne-shaped ruin, carved into a lone basalt butte. Lightning. Thin, green, silent. Spider jumped from the rock. Descending upon thunderous wings, Drogon alighted. The basalt surface rippled like candle wax under dragon flame, though no fire touched it. Upon the throne sat a figure neither living nor dead. It was robed in fragments of shadow, crown of pale crystal shards spiking skyward. In its lap rested the silver hatchling, eyes closed in placid sleep. The figure's hands, skeletal, elongated, cradled the dragon gently. Drogon bared his teeth. He spat fire, but the flame guttered, sucked sideways into a portal that bloomed near the throne, and extinguished without trace. The figure spoke, voice a susurrus of dry leaves. The egg hatched before its time, father of flame. The brand upon this child is but a sigil of an older debt. Valyria is no cradle for your brood. It is an anvil, and upon it gods and monsters forge chains anew. Drogon lunged. Air folded around him, crashing into unseen barriers that flung him sideways. He righted and roared again, but not at the figure. Instead, he summoned each of his children's names in the ancient speech of dragons, calling them across the night. From far beyond the caldera came answering cries. Fearful, urgent. They were under attack. A swarm of wyverns, blacker than smut, spiraled around the northern sky, driven by winds unnatural, eyes glowing pale as corpse flame. At their heart, a single rider in armor of fused bone directed the assault, with a blade of lightless metal. Drogon had seen wyverns terrorize the Gulf of Grief, but never so numerous, never so coordinated. This was a legion, bred or conjured for one purpose: to challenge dragonfire. He glanced back to the throne. The robed figure rose, still cradling the silver dragon. Choose, last scion of the queen. Protect what remains, or claim what the doom left unbroken. You have no time for both. With that, it stepped through a veil of rippling glass and was gone, taking the silver dragon beyond Drogon's reach. Heart torn near asunder, Drogon pivoted toward the caldera. His remaining brood fought bravely. The Crimson Daughter looped high, strafing the vanguard with flame. Her black brother snapped wyvern necks in midair. The youngest daughter wove between attackers, slashing membranes, yet numbers told. Carcasses littered the terraces, but more wyverns poured in, shrieking with a hunger that spoke of evil pedagogue. Drogon struck like a comet. He thundered beneath the flock, then vaulted upward, immolating a corridor of sky. Heat blistered the wyvern swarm, setting dozens alight in a chain reaction. Wings crisp, bodies spiraled down trailing oily smoke. Yet the foe pressed, rider urging them with that black blade, which drank fire rather than deflecting it. The Crimson Daughter shrieked as a trio of wyverns latched onto her, claws sinking between plates. She bucked, sent one plummeting, but the others tore at her wing root. Another swarm pinned the youngest daughter against a terrace wall. Drogon veered, ramming the attackers aside, yet he was only one, and the night birthed fresh enemies. And then a sound split the heavens. A jagged, crystalline cord like metal shearing in the world's deepest vault. From the north flashed a comet tail of azure light. The silver sun returned, haloed in blue flame, eyes burning bright as twin suns. He dived through wyverns as though they were ghosts, each passing glance vaporizing flesh. Where his flame struck, air itself petrified, leaving statues of charred wyvern mid-scream that shattered in the wind. Drogon bellowed triumph. Together, father and children carved a spiral of annihilation, forcing the swarm into retreat. The rider barked silent orders. Without a faceplate, his mouth was a gash of rotted iron. But the tide had turned. Wyverns fell, one by one, until those that remained fled toward the smoking sea, rider vanishing into shadow behind them. Silence returned, broken only by crackle of burning corpses. Drogon landed atop the central terrace. His children descended, wings heavy, bodies scored with cuts, yet alive. They pressed against him, their sides shivering from adrenaline. The silver sun alighted last. The brand on his chest glowed like a furnace door. He laid his head upon Drogon's neck. But in the hush of their embrace, the land trembled once more. The caldera's lake hissed, bubbles of blistering gas popping at its surface. Crystal ridges flared, their light strobing faster. Drogon's thoughts turned to the throne on the basalt butte, to the robed figure's warning. Valyria awakened beneath them, mindless as a volcano, purposive as an old god's malice. He lifted his gaze skyward. To remain was death, but to leave was to abandon the wellspring of power that his children had drawn upon, the crucible that might shape them into sovereigns, capable of remaking the known world. Above, stars wheeled in cold silence, caring nothing for dragons or men. The horizon to the west shimmered faintly, promising open sky beyond poisoned coasts. Yet to the east, plumes of fire climbed higher, as if new mountains birthed themselves before his eyes. Choice pressed upon Drogon like a mountain upon his wings. Stillness was impossible. Action unavoidable. He stepped forward. His children fanned out around him, waiting. The silver sun's brand pulsed, tiny flecks of blue fire falling from his scales. Drogon angled his head toward the smoking sea, ancestral home, cradle of doom, forge of dragonkind. He unfurled his wings wide enough to blot constellations, and roared. A sound bigger than grief, sharper than rage, brighter than hope. The caldera answered, erupting in light as vents shot twin fountains of sapphire flame. Out across ancient waters, the echo called to distant shores. In the halls of Dragonstone, stone dragons rattled their chains. In the crypts of Winterfell, forgotten embers stirred in the eyes of direwolf statues. Across the narrow sea, bells tolled in pentos, though no hand pulled the ropes. From every spine of the world, created things remembered what it was to stand in the shadow of true dragons, and trembled. Drogon leapt. Ash spiraled upward, caught in air made holy by the promise of rebirth. His children followed. 5 streaks of incandescent glory against the birth of a new dawn, soaring eastward over the rim of the smoking sea, where dragons once learned to breathe fire, and where, perhaps, they might learn to shape the fate of men anew. Okay. Dawn bled slowly into the smoking sea, as if the sun itself feared to unveil what secrets the night had birthed. Drogon and his brood wheeled above a ragged veil of red-gold mist, wings whispering over vapor so dense it seemed to breathe. Sea glass islands drifted beneath them like shards of a shattered mirror. Roots of drowned volcanoes whose crests were scabbed with obsidian and veined with faintly luminous ore. Each pulse of Drogon's heart felt magnified here. Each gust of wind seemed laden with the voices of the long dead, murmuring in a language formed of salt and ash. The dragon's shadows stretched in a fan across the vapor. Drogon's vast silhouette, then the 5 smaller echoes of his children. The silver sun, whom the others had begun to call Yerxares in the deep, throaty tongue they shared, flew a spear's length ahead, the eye brand on his breast glowing brighter in the rising light. Blue motes streamed from him like sparks off a smith's hammer, tracing arcs that folded and refolded in the wind until they vanished. Drogon kept him within reach, yet did not tug him backward. Instinct whispered that the silver-branded one was now as much compass as fledgling. They coursed east for hours until the morning broadened and the smoking sea's haze thinned. On the horizon a ring of mountains emerged, jagged as dragon teeth, black at their roots but rimmed in frosted white, as though winter itself had nested high above the infernal waters. Drogon had circled this range once decades ago, when Daenerys tugged on his neck ridges and laughed at the thermals that bore them skyward. Then the peaks had hissed and wept lava. Now they glittered with hoarfrost. The world here was softening, cooling. Yet at its core, the furnace of Valyria still churned. A column of icy vapor spiraled from the tallest peak, twisting skyward like a tether connecting heaven to the molten realm below. As Drogon angled toward it, he tasted currents of blistering heat, entwined with strands of air so cold they needled his lungs. The contrast made him snort smoke. Below, the youngest daughter, sleek and midnight blue, yelped a question in dragon speech. "What place is this?" He answered in a gruff rumble that spoke of caution, for the mountain was older than any of them and carried a scent unlike fire or snow. Something brittle, crystalline, and sharp as regret. They landed upon a saddle ridge just beneath the chimney of Frostcloud. The rock was glossed with black ice that hissed beneath Drogon's talons, yet did not crack. Sapient veins of mineral wove through it, glowing dimly. The ridge bowed inward to form a shallow amphitheater, its center occupied by a frozen lake. The lake was flawless, a mirror without ripple, reflecting the dragons so precisely that for a breath each seemed suspended between earth and sky. But the reflection of Yarxares was wrong. His mirrored self bore not one eyebrand but three, and all pulsed crimson rather than blue. Drogon hissed low. Yarxares cocked his head, puzzled. Before Drogon could warn him, the ice mirror spider webbed outward from under the silver dragon's foreclaw. The cracks converged on a point beneath the boy's chest, then sank into darkness. A heartbeat later, the lake shattered inward, spilling not water but glassy shards that fell in perfect silence, revealing a yawning pit filled with spiraling stairs of clear quartz descending into black. No sound rose from the abyss, yet a pull as sure as gravity tugged at Drogon's breastbone. He felt the lure within his children as well. The crimson daughter, boldest, edged forward, neck craned. Yarxares spread his wings and leapt into the hole before any could stop him, blue flame wreathing his tail. Drogon snarled, half in fury, half in awe at the child's certainty. He launched after, the others tumbling close behind. The stair pit widened by the spiral, until an entire subterranean cathedral yawned around them. Pillars of quartz fused with veins of frozen magma soared hundreds of feet, each carved with glyphs that squirmed when flamelight touched them. Above, the opening they had burst through resealed in silence, seamless as unbroken ice. Drogon landed upon a dais shaped like a seven-pointed star, its edges humming with suppressed energy. Yarxares crouched at the star's center, head cocked, listening to voices only he could hear. The other four clustered near their father, scales pricking with unease. All at once, the quartz pillars ignited, not with flame, but with an inner brilliance that raced upward, etching the chamber in blue-white radiance. In that light, Drogon saw frescoes carved into the vaulted roof. Dragons entwined with giants of ice, rivers of fire winding through snowscapes, a star falling in 7 fragments upon a city built upon dragon glass. The light converged behind the dais, coalescing into a humanoid figure 10 stories high, wrought of pure, luminous geometry. Where a face might have rested was a single triangle of radiant void, edges bleeding prism colors into the air. Its voice was not sound, but thought intertwined with the clap of thunder and the crackle of frost. Child of Shadowfire, branded by the Watcher's eye, you stand at the threshold of covenant. The world above forgets, but stone remembers. Will you claim the legacy unmarred, or will you remake it and risk the bones of time? Yarxares answered in a trill so high the others winced, and a concept flickered through Drogon. We will remake. The geometric colossus inclined its head. Shards for blood, chains for wings. Choose. A burst of prismatic blades erupted around the colossus, each blade spinning lazily like leaves on a pond, yet each radiated enough searing force to melt quartz. They drifted toward Yarxares. Drogon roared and lunged, but invisible walls snapped around the stardais, throwing him back. The Crimson Daughter loosed a torrent of flame that vanished before it struck the barrier, snuffed as though swallowed by a void. Yarxares stepped forward. The first blade touched the eye brand on his chest and dissolved into blue mist, that soaked into his scales. Another blade followed, then another. Each dissolved, feeding him. His silver feathers darkened into steel. The blue veins across his body flared violet. When the last blade merged with him, the geometric colossus dispersed into 1,000 shards of light that folded into the dragon. Xerxes shivered. Smaller now, then unfolded wings lined with translucent crystal that hummed as they flexed. The barrier collapsed. Drogon rushed to his child, inspecting for wound or poison. The silver dragon blinked eyes that now held pupils shaped like 6-pointed stars. Pulse of information washed across Drogon. A vision of a mirrored gate far beneath the sea. Of chains forged from souls. Of the Colossus naming itself the Archivist, left behind by the Valyrian Forge Masters, to guard a relic called the Prism of True Flames. Xerxes had accepted shard bonds that wove him to that relic, power to shape essence, cost yet unseen. A rumble shook the cathedral. Quartz split and rained down in glittering avalanches. Drogon herded the brood upward along the spiraling stairs, forcing speed though exhaustion tugged their wings. They burst out upon the frozen ridge as the mountain exhaled a geyser of steam so cold it smoked white against the sky. The cracked lake reformed behind them, but its mirror now shimmered a fractured blue. They flew on without pause, pushing east into afternoon. Fear gnawed Drogon. The Archivist's words spoke of choices with consequences, measured not in years, but eras. What burden had his son accepted? Yet when he looked upon the silver dragon, he saw not dread but dawning purpose. Below stretched plains of pale green glass. Ash dunes vitrified by long ago flame. From their centers rose clusters of prism towers, each rotating slowly like cogs in an ancient clock. The towers cast strobing shadows that made Drogon's vision swim. The younger daughter faltered, dizzy. Drogon ordered the brood higher, beyond the reach of sorcery's strobing. They crossed the plain of mirrors by twilight, and reached a coast where the smoking sea met land once fertile, now strewn with half-submerged manzas. Their windows leaked faint candle glow, though no mortal soul should walk these halls. At the mouth of a river whose water steamed though night air had cooled, Drogon settled the brood atop a basalt cliff pocked with caves. He prowled each cavern, ensuring no lurking wyvern or stone man awaited them, then allowed his children to curl beside him. They slept dream-restless, twitching wings, sparks leaking from nostrils. Drogon did not sleep. He scanned horizons fragrant with storm. In the distance, flashes of emerald lightning crawled beneath low clouds. It reminded him of the rider's blade. Somewhere out there, the bone-armored foe marshaled fresh hunts. The world trembled on the cusp of awakening power, and power called challengers. Near midnight, a whisper brushed Drogon's mind. A memory voice shaped like Daenerys' laughter, dancing along ridges of thought before settling into words neither Valyrian nor dragon. Come to the Bay of Ashes, beloved. Bring fire, bring hope. I guided him to the eggs. Now guide him to us. The voice faded, leaving the taste of summer wine and dragonbone dust. Drogon rumbled, throat tight. Was it a phantom born of grief, or had some fragment of her spirit truly lingered, bound to the unborn brood she never saw? He exhaled a plume that wavered in the still air. The silver moon broke free of cloud banks, bathing the smoking sea in argent enough to reveal shifting shapes upon the water. Great dark bodies cruising just beneath the surface, wakes trailing like the strokes of oars. Sea worms, older cousins to dragons, rarely breached. Tonight they glided in patterns reminiscent of a sigil. 3 spirals converging upon a single point directly beneath the basalt cliff. Drogon watched until they sank beyond sight. When at last he drifted into slumber, his dreams were molten. Daenerys walking a rope bridge of fire out over black waters, beckoning him onward. Morning arrived rudely. A scouring wind whipped down from the glass plains, carrying a blizzard of glitter that pricked scale and fouled eyes. Drogon rousted the brood. They launched south-southeast, gusts buffeting them sideways. By midday they spied a monstrous fissure splitting the land for leagues, a wound still amber-hot at its roots. Molten rivers gurgled, exhaling sulfur so thick it blanketed sky in ochre smog. Within that smog shapes writhed, Not wyverns but things with too many wings and too few bones. Drogon signaled caution. The brood tucked wings and glided low over the fissure's far rim, avoiding the worst clouds. They halted only when a vast gulf of flame barred their path. A canyon filled not with earth, but with a single living curtain of fire that rose from trench floor to cloud lid. The fire did not roar. It sang, a deep choral vibration that rattled teeth. In its depths silhouettes swam, antediluvian dragon shapes coiling and uncoiling faster than thought. Yerxerys flew closest, wings shimmering crystalline, and the singing shifted pitch. Not hostile, but inquisitive. He hovered, letting the vibration thread through his bones. Drogon felt the resonance too, a melody that echoed the archivist's mental cadence. Suddenly, one flame shape peeled from the curtain, bursting free in a roaring spiral that resolved into a dragon twice Drogon's size, crafted wholly of living fire. Eyes were pits of white-hot void, claws dripped sparks like blood. Yet the flame dragon did not strike. It circled, studying, then projected a thought so potent the air quaked. Blood of flame returned, bearer of shards. Why do you trespass upon the Vale of Embers? Yerxerys answered with a pulse that painted symbols across the sky in blue fire. Drogon understood only fragments. Legacy, healing, path beyond chains. The Flame Guardian considered, then dipped its blazing head toward Drogon. In ages lost, your kind forged us as watchers. No flesh may pass here, unless the Covenant's bearer speaks the pass flame. Yerxerys shrieked a single syllable that cracked the atmosphere like a stone through glass. The curtain of fire parted, revealing a corridor of swirling embers, long enough to swallow mountains. The brood dove into its heart. Heat beyond mortal reckoning pummeled them yet did not scorch. Instead it wove around scales, threading through gaps and sealing nicks. Old wounds mended, membranes straightened. Aches of battle faded. Even Drogon felt younger, though memory remained heavy. The corridor spat them out above a circular basin walled by basalt cliffs. At the basin's center sprawled a city fossilized in glass. Its towers collapsed outward in grotesque petal patterns, as though something had exploded within. Each street brimmed with black ash, solidified into humanoid shapes. People captured mid-flight, mid-scream. The youngest daughter whimpered. Drogon rumbled reassurance but shared her dread. This place reeked of death sorcery, a catastrophe so sudden it stamped life into statues. He banked lower, wings clipping eddies of ash. At the city's epicenter stood a ziggurat split neatly in two, each half shoved apart by some unimaginable force. Within the gap shimmered a shard of glass suspended above a void. Perhaps the absence of whatever once filled that space. Yerxerys descended directly atop the ziggurat's lip, gazed at the shard. Drogon settled beside him. The others ringed them. The shard pulsed faintly. Reflected in its surface, Drogon saw not himself, but Daenerys. Eyes bright, smile tender. She beckoned forward, whisper silence. His heart seized, but the vision shifted. Daenerys crumbled to ash, revealing the bone-armored rider, blade raised. Behind the rider loomed a legion of wyverns, wings drumming war. Then the shard burst with radiance, and the image dissolved. Yerxerys' wings snapped open. Here, he thought, lies the hinge of storms. If we claim the shard, we can close the gate that feeds our hunters. But the shard thirsts for life. One of us must join with it. Drogon growled refusal. But Yerxerys' mind voice was resolute. I bear the brand for this. The shard might devour older flame, but crystal-forged fire may bind it. Before Drogon could answer, wind howled overhead. The Bone Riders advanced guard, diving. Scores of wyverns hammered down in spear formation, black vapor trailing their jaws. Drogon roared the brood to battle. Crimson Daughter answered, with a sweeping beam of scarlet flame that carved 3 wyverns apart. Mid-plunge, the black sun rose to intercept another knot, shredding wings. Spinning corpses earthward, the rider himself emerged atop the largest wyvern, its hide plated with scale iron. black blade crackled with void-green arcs. He pointed at Xerxes and the wyvern dove. Drogon hurled himself skyward, ramming the beast aside. The impact splintered bone armor, but jarred Drogon's shoulder. He locked jaws with the beast, grappling, ripping membrane. The rider leapt from the saddle, landing upon Drogon's neck like an anchor of ice. His blade bit scales, drank flame. Where it cut, heat fled, leaving numb frost ridges. Xerxes, meanwhile, pressed foreclaws to the shard. Blue glyphs unfurled around him like blooming flowers, each petal a rune of containment. Energy siphoned from the shard into his body, illuminating veins, brightening the eye brand. A tremendous shriek erupted from the void beneath the shard, a banshee roar of imprisoned power sensing escape's end. The battle overhead blurred into chaos. The youngest daughter was clipped by two wyverns, tumbled wing over wing, only to be saved by her crimson sister's intercession. The black sun grappled a wyvern twice his weight, flames scorching its underside until it buckled in stinking rain. Drogon bucked to throw the rider, but the blade sank deeper, siphoning warmth. He felt joints stiffen, frost rimming nostrils. The rider hissed a tongue that scraped at mind. "Fall, relic. Your age ends." From the blade flared tendrils seeking Drogon's heart. He answered with memory. Dawn over Meereen's pyramids. Daenerys' hand upon his snout, her words of trust. The memory burned hotter than any flame. Drogon unleashed that heat, not outward, but inward, down arteries and marrow. Frost cracked. Scales flared ember red. Blood hissed around the blade until metal glowed. The rider shrieked as temperature reversed, armor blistering. Drogon whipped his neck. The rider flew free, scraping across basalt, landing before the ziggurat cleft. At that moment, Xerxes cried out. The shard fused into his torso, sinking as though into water. Blue light radiated from him in seismic ripples that threw wyverns aside. The gap between ziggurat halves healed with crystalline growth, sealing the void. The city's glass corpses shimmered, fractures appearing across their surfaces. With a collective sigh, they dissolved into dust released from stasis. The Bone Rider rose, blade sputtering. He looked upon the sealed ziggurat and howled, an unearthly hollow sound that made the towers quake. He sprinted for Xerxes, but the silver dragon raised wings now edged with shard spines. With a flick, he released a fan of blue energy that struck the rider, ripping armor to shards, hurling him back. The wyverns faltered, leaderless. Drogon seized the moment, igniting a cyclone of flame that consumed half the flock. The rest fled west into fleeing dusk. Silence fell, broken only by crackling embers and the distant rush of still-burning plains. Drogon limped toward Xerxes, exhaustion weighting each stride. The silver dragon stood motionless, eyes dim. The shard had vanished beneath his scales, but its glow leaked from every seam of his body. He looked older. Shoulders broader, neck longer. But also fragile. Edges fraying like a star on the verge of supernova. "It is done," he whispered, voice reverberating through every pane of shattered glass. "The gate is closed. But the flux within me, if left unchecked, I will burn through worlds." Drogon curled a wingtip around him. "We will find balance." He nudged his son's chest, feeling the thrum of prodigious power. But even as he touched, he sensed a countdown, each beat accelerating time toward an unknown threshold. The Crimson Daughter, her flank torn but healing, spoke timidly. The archivist said shards for blood, chains for wings. "We have shards. Where are the chains?" From the dust before them rose a faint shimmer. The Bone Rider, half-buried, laughed, a rusted rasp. "The chains lie beneath the storm heart. You seal one gate, beast, yet many remain. Power seeps through cracks you cannot see. Fly to the storm heart if you dare. Their void meets sky, and you will find your chains, or die beneath them." The rider's body imploded inward, leaving only bone dust that gusted away. Drogon stared at the hollow spot where the foe had vanished. The name Stormheart coiled in his mind like a barbed wire. He tasted old memories of wind howls far south, beyond Valyria's rim, where tempests birthed demons that fed on lightning. Chains, gates, storm hearts. symbols of a design too vast for any one creature to bear. Above, clouds stack world, bruised with green lightning. The world refused to rest. Drogon summoned the brood. They lifted into a sky seething with fresh threats, yet hope, fragile and hot, burned between them. For every gate closed, another might open. But they flew now with greater purpose than survival. They flew to shape the world's breath. Yerxaris, glowing like a comet seed, took up station at Drogon's right. The Crimson Daughter ranged left, black and blue siblings behind. They traced an arc, south-southeast, toward the oceanic horizon where storms brewed. Each wing beat was a promise, each breath a pact. They would meet the storm heart, claim the chains, find balance before burning. Behind them, Valyria's broken city disintegrated into ash that rose, glittered, and settled like snow upon a land already too burdened by history. Night returned, and with it, the chorus of distant thunder. But the darkness no longer felt absolute. Within it pulsed 6 hearts rhythm joined. 1 great, 5 rising, all aflame with beginnings that dwarfed endings. They disappeared into Cloudbank, into Stormwall, into legend. And the smoking sea lay quiet for the first time in an age, as though even doom needed breath before the next reckoning. Wow. Night collapsed around the little company, a velvet furnace brimming with charged hush, as Drogon guided his 5 toward the southern rim of the smoking sea. Behind them, the horizon still glowed faint sapphire where the shard-bound gate had sealed, faint as distant lanterns, a reminder of both victory and debt. The younger dragons breathed ragged with exhaustion yet refused to ask for rest. Each sensed the ticking fuse inside their silver brother, the way his veins pulsed brighter whenever his heart quickened. They would not waste a heartbeat he might need. Stars drowned above thickening cloud. Everywhere the sky murmured, a thunder so low it was felt more than heard, as if 2 continents ground together on the far side of creation. Drogon rode thermals higher, trying to glimpse the storm heart Daenerys' phantom voice had named. 9 times he had crossed the world with her, yet the map in his marrow held no place called Storm Heart. But he tasted something now, bitter-sweet on the wind. Brine, ozone, a smell like wet iron hammered too long. It was as though the world's deepest forge was quenching itself in ocean. They flew until the youngest daughter's wing beats faltered, and the black sun's tongue lolled, scorched from too many blasts spent. Only Yerxaris seemed tireless, though each ripple of blue radiance left his scales finer. Edges blinked away like sand in wind. Drogon swept a slow descending spiral, eyes scouring the dark sea. A line of rocky islets appeared, broken teeth jutting from churning surf. One large enough to cradle them. He trumpeted a command and dropped. The island was nothing more than a volcanic plug gutted by time, its inner cone open to black sky. Sea spray hissed through cracks, leaving salt crusts that glittered in starlight. Drogon herded the brood inside the crater. Basalt formed natural terraces where they folded wings. Hot vapors seeped from fissures, a poor warmth yet better than night wind. The dragons nestled nose to wing, except Yerxaris, who remained upright at the crater's rim, crystal-veined wings catching stray starlight, eyes fixed south. Hours bled away. Twice Drogon lifted his head to check the silver sun. Each time Yerxaris stood vigilant, as if carved. At near dawn, Drogon rumbled invitation to rest. Yerxaris replied with a pulse of thought. Weary yet determined, I dream while waking. The shard pours visions. If I sleep, they will drown me. Drogon grunted, understanding. He rose, pushed himself beside the smaller dragon, and together they watched the sea. Gray daylight revealed the storm heart at last. Not a mountain or maelstrom, but both. A heaving tower of cloud rooted in swirling ocean, so wide its skirts spanned leagues, so high its crown pierced the troposphere and shredded sunlight into spectral rings. The vortex appeared almost still from distance, yet gale bands sprinted round its waist, stripes of charcoal and iron studded with flashes of green lightning. Rainbows arced, shattered, reformed, swallowed again. The spectacle dwarfed even Valyria's worst infernos. It was arrogance sculpted of weather. The brood woke one by one. silence stretching in awe. The Crimson Daughter's tail quivered, the Black Sun's crest laid flat. Drogon felt the same primitive hesitation, a prey animal's instinct telling him no wing should tempt that sky. But Daenerys' whisper returned. Bring fire, bring hope. And he knew there could be no turning. They took flight single file, Drogon first, his shadow swallowing foamy breakers. Distance gobbled hours, and the storm heart swelled, details clawing free. Lower cloud shell grinding counterspin to the middle bands. White plumes shooting upward like inverted waterfalls. When they crossed the outermost wind wall, the air snapped from summer warm to winter knife. Rain hissed sideways, instantly steaming against dragonhide. Thunder cracks beat so close they felt like artillery. Drogon tucked wings, diving through sheer layers, by instinct honed from marine siege days. The brood mimicked, weaving spirals that almost danced through lethal gusts. Yet the storm grew cunning. A downdraft seized the youngest daughter, flinging her upward, flipping her into a tumbling stall. She shrieked. Drogon banked, but crosswinds smashed his angle. Only the Black Sun's quick lunge clipped her tail, steadied her, nudged her back into glide. Ice needles riddled their hides, blood meandered in crimson runnels, then washed away. Deeper, they burrowed. Cloud darkness became midnight. No, not midnight, but bruised purple murk, shot through with veins of luminous jade. Lightless rain sheeted off them in torrents that glowed briefly where it touched Yerxaries. Each drop evaporated in blue sparks. Far ahead, at the storm's very spinal core, Drogon saw a flicker of something not cloud. A lattice of dull brass bands swirling inside the vortex like ribs inside a throat. So vast the mind balked. Chains, Drogon realized. Valyrian superforged, encircling a hollow cylinder of air. Lightning forked across those bands. Where bright forks struck metal, energy funneled downwards, disappearing below the ocean's roiling brim. Storm and chain drank each other's fury. Was this the cage the Bone Rider had taunted them toward? A roar echoed, not thunder, but reptilian and enraged. Something enormous rose from within the chain lattice. Wings broader than Drogon's but oddly translucent. Body composed of half-coagulated vapor and crackling electricity. Eyes twin nodes of plasma. It looked like a dragon forgotten by flesh, resurrected as weather. The creature's roar disassembled into staccato booms that churned wind further. The vapor dragon darted, velocity impossible. A lightning bolt given cunning. It slammed into the Black Sun, claws of charged mist ripping 3 furrows down his flank. The young dragon spiraled, smoke pouring from wounds that cauterized even as they bled. Before Drogon could engage, Yerxaries streaked past, crystal wings buzzing. Blue shards sloughed off him like meteors, chasing the lightning beast. Upon impact, each shard flared, draining brilliance, forcing the storm wraith to recoil. It retaliated with a whip of white-hot filament that snapped across Yerxaries' chest. But the shard in him drank a portion of the energy, dimming his aura yet leaving him airborne. Drogon seized opportunity, bellowed a wordless war cry, and unleashed black-red inferno. Fire collided with ionized vapor, generating thunderclap luminous enough to blind. When sight cleared, the storm wraith recoalesced behind them, but its mass had thinned, contours ragged. Still, the storm convulsed. Wyverns of cloud coalesced from peripheral bands, howling forward in hostile flocks. Spines crackling static. Drogon recognized the shaping. Someone, somewhere inside the storm heart, commanded. This was not mere weather's whim. His memory flew to the robed figure, to archivist voiceless warnings, to the rider's last snarl. Many gates remain. The mastermind lurked ahead. He signaled a break. Crimson Daughter and Black Sun to harry the wyvern flocks. Youngest Daughter to shield them. Drogon and Yerxaries would punch straight for the lattice. Wind buffeted, but determination hardened muscle. They arrowed forward. The brass bands loomed. Up close, they were not brass but orichalc alloy, etched with runes big as galley masts, revolving slowly counter to storm spin, each link the length of a city. Between bands, Pockets of calmer air spiraled downward. A maintenance corridor inside a hurricane. Drogon dove through gap, Xerxes behind. Instant hush replaced the maelstrom. The eye within the eye. Here, air hung heavy, tinged by ozone, and some sweeter scent like flowering myrrh. At the core floated a spire of stone, impossibly there, anchored by 4 titanic chains descending into sea. The spire's surface crawled with violet flames that produced neither heat nor smoke. Platforms jutted like nest perches along its length, and upon the highest perched a familiar silhouette, the Bone Rider, though now his armor fused with storm matter, helm crowned by arcs of living lightning. In his hand, the void green blade stretched longer, now more spear than sword. Beside him knelt half a dozen figures robed head to toe, faces hidden behind mirrored masks. They chanted, voices braiding with the storm's bass. With each stanza, violet flame brightened and chain tension groaned. Drogon's heart clenched. Those chains were unraveling. The rider raised spear, pointed at Drogon. A surge of wind hammered downward. Drogon angled wings, barely clung. Xerxes shot ahead, azure plume cleaving stillness, landing upon a mid-level platform. Blue light fanned outward, disrupting chant. The masked acolytes faltered. One reeled, mask cracking, exposing a withered face streaked with veins of emerald crystal. The parasite magic Xerxes had drunk. Whatever covenant chained their lives to the spear, it flickered under shardfire. The rider leapt. Spear, spinning. Drogon cut across to intercept, jaws closing around mid-shaft. Void metal seared gums, but he held. Rider released weapon, vaulted onto Drogon's head, driving gauntleted fist into left eye ridge. Drogon whipped, scissoring claws upward, but the rider vaulted again, landing upon spire flank. Meanwhile, Xerxes climbed toward peak, each beat shedding more glow. Shards flared, compensating. The acolytes recovered, formed semicircle, hands weaving sigils. Lances of violet fire stabbed. Xerxes skated between, returning sprays of blue crystal that bored holes through leather and bone. Drogon unleashed full furnace upon Spire's side, slagging stone into lava, yet violet warding sigils emerged, drinking heat. He needed to break chain anchors, not just wound Spire. He scanned, found the 4 primary chains clasped to nubs of orichalc emerging below water. If those were severed incorrectly, energy might release catastrophically. Wind howled again. 2 more stormwraith dragons spawned, flanking Xerxes. They dove, tails crackling. The silver dragon spun vertical, slicing one apart via shard wing, but the other clamped jaws on his trailing edge, ripping scales and crystal. Xerxes screamed. Light burst, hurling attacker clear, though chunk of wing membrane tore free, fluttered like burning parchment. Drogon lunged onto platform above acolytes, crushing 2 under bulk. Eye. He reared, bit at the next. Green ichor sprayed, half blood, half raw magic. The others fell back, chanting, turning shrill. Their masks split seams, violet flames leaking from within. They were sacrifices, sustained by the storm, destined to burn. Drogon's flame engulfed them. They ignited, voices bleeding into thunder. Only the rider remained. He strode from a shadowed doorway cut in air itself, spear replaced by twin sickles of void light. His words scraped. You close one wound and open another, father of old flame. The world's bones will not hold against these stitchings. Give me the shard, son. He is key to safe sundering. Drogon answered with a gout that roared like mountain collapse. The rider cut a glyph, and flame fell sideways into the void behind him. He stepped through fold, re-emerging atop Xerxes' ravaged wing. Jagged sickle curved for killing stroke. Xerxes countered, not with shard bolts but with voice. A cry so sharp it banished sound, left blank shock. The rider staggered. Crystal spikes erupted from Xerxes' breast, impaling rider's hip. Blue and green lights wrestled. The shard burned brighter than ever, feeding on conflict yet tearing Xerxes apart. Scales around embedding point delaminated, drifting like ash petals. Drogon's terror spiked. His son would implode if Siphon continued. He roared command the others knew instinctively, converge on chains. Crimson Daughter, Black Sun. Youngest dove through outer wind wall, their earlier battle done. They harried a path downward, drawing storm wraiths away. Drogon followed, clipping spire edge deliberately. Fracturing ward glyphs, he found first chain anchor. Orichalc halos, braced by 6 runic struts. He wrapped forelimbs about padstones and heaved. Metal screeched. Runes spat sparks. Out of clouds swarmed 6 lesser riders astride wyverns, each bearing hook spears tipped with charred starlight. They jabbed at Drogon's haunches, drawing hisses. He silenced 2 with tail swipe, another with side blast. The Crimson Daughter dove past, clamped jaws on a strut opposite. Together they pulled, severing bond. The chain jerked, 1/4 of storm wall stuttering. Energy bled upward, through broken conduit, out to open sky in pillar of sheet lightning that leached half the cloud's color. Instantly, downdrafts reversed, vortex leaning askew. On spire summit, Erxaries hurled the rider off wing. The Void Lord tumbled, vanished into storm. But victory lacked sweetness. Erxaries collapsed on platform. Chest fissuring around shard. Blue brilliance flickered, strabbing dangerously. Second chain. Black Sun and Youngest locked teeth around supports. Drogon reinforcing. A wyvern battalion attacked, but the Daughters scorched them mid-arc. The anchor snapped. Storm tilt worsened. Core beginning to open like monstrous eye revealing starless space beneath. Water funneled upward in incandescent geyser, atoms splitting light. The spire buckled. Void Lord reappeared near its base, limbs hissing molten. Half his armor gone. Revealing flesh of green glass shot through with bone splinters. He howled, thrust sickles into spire heart. Violet flame pulsed, overloading. He did not care to save Cage now. He sought detonation that would consume all and perhaps birth new gate. Drogon knew only one path. He propelled himself skyward. Seizing spire midsection, colliding with rider. Sickle pierced his chest scale but lodged short of heart. Drogon crushed foe against stone, jaws clamping torso till armor shattered. He flung remains into throat of vortex, where they atomized in electric burst. But spire wounds multiplied. Violet fire spilled uncontrolled, licking Drogon's underside. He forced climb, reached summit where Erxaries quivered on brink of critical radiance. Shard edges protruded like shrapnel ribs, each pulse frayed more of his outline. Drogon lowered head, nostrils taking his son's scent, hot metal and fear and wind-tossed sea. He spoke in low thrumming growl of home, of first hunt, of warmth shared in Valyrian cavern. Erxaries' burning gaze steadied. I cannot hold, the thought whispered. Brittle crystal clinking. The chain hearts feed storm. I must bind my flux into final lock. You must set the seal. Before Drogon understood, Erxaries slid off platform, diving toward ocean, wings tattered but still shaping flight. The last 2 chains remained anchored, one north, one west. Drogon barked to the brood. They split, Crimson assisting eldest to third anchor. Black and Youngest attacking fourth. Drogon barreled after Erxaries. The silver dragon plunged through gut of vortex, where brass lattice broke into loose coils, whipping like serpents. He shouldered past, trailing comet tails of blue ember. Below waited the sea, but not sea. A whirlpool, black core recessed beyond vision. At its center a metallic hub rose, hammered flat as battlefield shield, rune-seared decades ago. Each chain footed into cleats round hub rim. Water sloshed over but never submerged the dais. Erxaries landed at hub's center. He drove foreclaws into engraved monolith, where all chain energies braided. Shard flared white-blue. Sea vapor exploded upward in columns. Hub runes blazed alive, counter-rotating glyphs biting into silver dragon's limbs, shackling him in living light. He screamed. Drogon slammed onto hub rim, water tossing across his ankles. He would tear chains free himself. But Erxaries' mental cry stopped him. No, Daenerys. Your strength now seals me. You are hammer. I the molten metal. Strike when I call. Above. Crimson Daughter and Black Sun each burst a final anchor. Chains snapped, coil lengths whipping outward, dragging detached ends into sea like slain krakens. Storm body convulsed, outer bands flinging slush walls. Sky beyond bared raw glimpses of sun. Yet core vortex tightened, funneling all residual spin into hub zone. As though hurricane attempted to rehouse its heart, Yurksare's body vanished inside conflagration of blue-white. Shard extruded spears of crystal that punched into hub, knitting glyphs closed. But storm energy still drove downward, a deluge looking for vessel. If allowed, it would overfill Yurksare's, shatter him and hub both. Drogon realized his role, to shape exhaust. He inhaled deeper than ever, furnace cavities drawing molten breath from toes to crown. When Yurksare's mind voice finally thundered, "Strike now, father." Drogon loosed. Flame of dark red edges, black core hotter than basalt flow, roared in cone around Yurksare's, not touching but encircling, forging barrier. Element met element. Storm plasma slammed into dragonfire sheath, superheating, spitting neutered steam skyward rather than back into Shard. Thunder, like birth of worlds, rolled. Water flashed to vapor. Hub sank a foot from cooled contraction, locking seals. The tempest above screamed and broke. Clouds shredded into skeins. Wind fled outward in concentric flights, leaving silence unnatural. Rain that had been falling upward now drifted down in gentle mist, catching sun shards, birthing sudden rainbow halo around dragons and hub. Far overhead the brass lattice creaked to a halt, then began drifting apart, links cooling orange. Yurksare slumped forward. Chains of light winked out. Crystal spikes receded. Shards sinking flush beneath scales now grayed, matte. He breathed, a ragged wheeze. But breath continued. Drogon touched snout to his forehead. An ember still glowed under bone. Crimson Daughter crowed triumph from sky shelf. Black Sun spiraled down, youngest clinging his tail tip. They landed. A hush lingered where storm once howled, like cathedral after choir's last note. For long moments, they merely breathed. The world felt stretched thin, about to tear, or perhaps ready for new cloth. Drogon scanned watery horizon. No wyvern, no bone lord, no wraith. Valyria lay distant north beneath sunbreak, only its memory staining clouds. Yurksare's stirred. His eyes regained blue glow, but now softer, tempered. Flux joined a chain remnant within me. "I will not explode," he whispered, "but I am bound. I cannot leave this place far." Hub and I are linked, lighthouse and flame. The youngest daughter keened protest, pressed against him. But Yurksare's nuzzled, reassuring. "I choose this anchorage. Otherwise the storm will regrow ungoverned." Drogon understood sacrifices. Daenerys had taught him. He bared teeth in mournful pride. Then he surveyed brass lattice drifting apart. Pieces would scatter across deep sea. Choke shipping lanes become coffins for the unwary. They must sink them or gather them. Task for days ahead. For now, Drogon spread wings to tropic sun, water sloughing off ebon plates. He trumpeted across calm vastness. Not triumph or challenge, but announcement. The age of hiding was ended. Dragons once more shaped weather and fate. Somewhere men would tremble. Somewhere songs would kindle. In distant Essos, merchant captains would report a titanic cyclone evaporating overnight, replaced by shimmering pillar of blue at horizon's margin. In Westeros, ravens would speak of strange pressure drops. On Dragonstone, the carved stone beasts would quake, cracking lichen as new magic rippled. And somewhere, perhaps where winds are born, a shadow of Daenerys Stormborn would smile, seeing her legacy carried by scale and flame. The brood leapt skyward, circling their anchored brother, weaving a spiral salute. Yurksaris raised his healing wings, blue cords tethering him to hub yet granting ceiling enough to wheel slowly. They chorused, a harmony of 6 hearts, 1 earthbound, 5 roaming. When echo faded, Drogon banked west, guiding his children toward uncharted archipelagos glittering in afternoon sun. Places where they might gather strength, survey fresh gates, whispered by foes. Behind them the storm heart lay quiet. Hub glowing steady azure, a beacon to mariners and omen to kings. Upon its surface a sigil had etched. Dragon with crystal eye, combining old Valyria's three-headed crest with something new. Sea washed around, steam rising gentle, blessing. Night would come again, storms too, but balance had found purchase, and on wings forged by love and sacrifice. The future wheeled, wide as sky, bright as kindled dawn. Okay. Wind. Ocean fog unrolled beneath Drogon like a pale bolt of silk, smooth enough to tempt a glide despite its hidden perils. He led his brood above the mist, navigating by the sun's raw gleam at their right shoulders, and the steady shush of waves that rose through cloud. When the storm heart shrank to a turquoise bruise on the horizon, the mist thinned, parting to reveal an archipelago of basalt ridges, flame-orange beaches, and lagoons lit from below by volcanic vents. Each island looked newborn, as though some wandering god had tamped smoking clay down into the sea only yesterday. Hunger gnawed. The black sun spotted a shoal of long-necked sea worms basking on a crescent of igneous rock, and banked with a bark of challenge. The others followed, wings pummeling air until sand exploded beneath their impact. Stone cracked. Reptiles scattered. Dragons gave chase, scooping prey whole or scorching escapees into sizzling cuts. Drogon snatched a bullworm in mid-twist, bit through spine, and tasted mineral-rich blood that recalled his first hunts on Marine's coast. He left the carcass for the youngest daughter to finish and surveyed the lagoon's rim, half expecting wyvern scouts to shadow them out of vengeful instinct. Nothing stirred but salt wind and the irregular heartbeat of distant vents. After feeding, they found a caldera cupped by columnar basalt. Heat rose in shimmering curtains. Obsidian terraces shelved high and wide enough for stretch wings. Here, Drogon settled, signaling the others to rest. Crimson Daughter prowled perimeter, ever restless, while the black sun sprawled nose down, digestion already dimming his eyelids. The youngest tucked beneath Drogon's right wing, humming a hatchling lullaby that vibrated through themselves more than the air. Drogon half slept, half listened, thoughts drifting to Yurk's anchored flicker far behind. Each dragon possessed an inner compass pointing to their kin, a subtle tug born of shared flame. Drogon felt Yurk's mote in that inner sky, a soft, steady twinkle, no longer the frantic pulse of imminent rupture, but no less fragile for its steadiness. He wondered how long the Silver One could bear the anchorage before longing overpowered duty. Wondering slid into memory, the sharp rush of Daenerys' laugh as she urged Drogon into reckless dives above Astapor. The proud flare of her chin before Marine's Great Pyramid, when freedmen roared her name. Her absence ached now like phantom limb, yet tonight the ache mingled with curiosity. If echoes of her voice could guide them to the storm heart, what other embers of her spirit drifted on this charged wind? Dusk angled shadows across the lagoon, gilding steam pink. Crimson Daughter returned from patrol and startled him. She bore a length of pitted metal gripped in 4 claws, wide as her shoulder and carved with glyphs. She dropped it before Drogon, trilling. He nosed the slab. It tasted of brine, sulfur, and bleeding-edge sorcery. The runes were familiar in skeleton, but corrupted, their curves warped as if scrawled by hurried hands in the last breaths of life. A warning? A seal? He stored the scent in memory. Night retreated swiftly when twin moons rose, casting silver nets across water. The brood slumbered, save Drogon. Sensing sleep impossible, he launched, wing beats muffled by humid dark. He circled high until the archipelago arranged itself beneath him in ragged spiral. At its hub waited a singular island shaped like a question mark, its center alight with steady magenta glow. That color felt wrong, neither volcanic nor starlight, but something coaxed from living essence. Drogon gauged distance. Curiosity won. He banked south. The island proved smaller than its radiance suggested, its glow originating from a squat dome of fused glass jutting out of coral. No beast roamed, no wind gnashed, only a melodic thrum, half felt in bone. Drogon landed lightly, talons ticking on slick surface. Beneath glass undulated liquid light, swirling around two objects. A petrified egg bigger than Drogon's head, and a figure seated cross-legged, draped in bleached Valyrian robes. Flesh translucent enough that veins pulsed like threads of moonstone. The figure's eyelids opened at Drogon's shadow, revealing sockets devoid of orbs, filled instead with swirling nebulae. A soundless voice entered Drogon's mind, gentle as candle smoke yet edged with rust. Child of fire reforged, the hinge you unbound has rippled through still water. Shards settle, cracks grow. The figure reached toward the egg. The membrane responded, hairline fractures, exhaling pink vapor. We nurse the last heart of Coar Fesnar, Stormfather of my people. He shall rise or ruin. Your path intersects ours if blood and courage permit. Images followed. Silhouettes of scaled shapes writhing through ocean chasms, chains inscribed with living script. An eclipse swallowing 3 moons. Drogon bristled, but the figure's presence felt neither hostile nor wholly benign, more akin to archivist than manipulator. He withdrew, rumble soft but wary, and launched back to the caldera before visions nested deeper. At dawn he conveyed fragments of encounter via scent thought and throat trill. The black sun hissed misgiving. Crimson Daughter perked ears toward horizon in excited challenge. Youngest Daughter mimicked both, torn D1D. Drogon weighed. Their quest to mend Yerxerai's bindings hadn't ended. It had broadened. If new storms brewed from Coar Fesnar's egg, perhaps release or reforging would yield another anchor. Reef for Silver Brothers' burden, or disaster surpassing the storm heart. Decision thrummed. They would scout, but caution must guide. They flew 2 islands closer that day, learning currents and mapping shoals. Each isle offered new oddities. Stone spires hollowed into perfect tubes that played haunting notes when wind threaded them. Glass reefs bursting with coral that glowed indigo at noon. Beaches littered by carapaces of crabs made wholly of clear quartz, scuttling until sun glare shattered them into sand. Such strangeness suggested boundaries where natural law tangled with old Valyrian experiments or deeper magics, perhaps the shadow play of dead sorcerers chasing echoes of power left after the doom. Drogon ordered rest often and kept altitude high, his senses raked open for unseen predators. On the 3rd day, Crimson Daughter dove on what appeared to be a fat gull. Mid-snatch, gull's feathers folded inward like shutters, unveiling a gleaming bronze drone. An automaton no larger than a hawk, but whirring with gears and runic insets. It spit a spray of shimmering dust that corroded Crimson's scale patch to smoke before her fire charred it. The device fell into surf and perforated water with steam. Unease flapped within Drogon's chest. Someone alive, not just relic ghosts, studied them. That night, sentries soared under moon. On Drogon's sweep he glimpsed pinpricks of lamplight near horizon. A flotilla silhouette, ships bearing high prows and sails, stiff as claw. Not fishing dhows or spice runners. Hull shape screamed war. He counted 7, maybe 9, moving with rhythmic deliberation toward Archipelago's heart. He descended to brood with alarm swirl. Warships so near Valyria's hazard zone suggested desperation or lunatic arrogance. Either trait mingled poorly with dragons. Black Sun hissed for preemptive strike. Flame hungry, youngest trembled at prospect of ballistae. Drogon deliberated. Previous brushes with scorpion bolts taught caution. Yet, ignoring unknown adversaries risked ambush on their nests. Before dawn they shadowed the fleet. Wings ghosted above fog until sails materialized in true view. Crimson canvas emblazoned with 4-pointed stars circled by serpent. Along rails stood ballistae, but larger than any marine or Korth fielded. Their bolts tipped obsidian, edged with rune-etched silver. Men below wore armor lacquered midnight. Their helms bore crystal visors refracting dawn haze. As first sun-slice breached waterline, a horn bellowed from flagship. Tone harmonized with storm's lost key. Obsidian bolts hissed skyward, trailing threads of quicksilver smoke that hunted heat like living snares. Drogon swerved, but youngest daughter's right wing caught a thread. Silver smoke wrapped bone, slicing membrane with acid sizzle. She tumbled, screaming. Drogon narrowed down, catching her before sea devoured. Crimson and black children raked ships with strafing flame, yet flame bent off shimmering shields cast by spinning discs atop masts. Aegis of sorcery. The flagship's prow unfurled panels revealing a crystal lens. Light blossomed through lens into coherent lance of pale fire, gouging sky. Drogon felt skin prickle. It sought him. He dove under angle, cursed speed of beam pivot. Crimson Daughter pummeled lens with fire, but energy dispersed like water off wax. She veered. Lens tracked. Youngest, cradled in Drogon's claws, whimpered. Rage pooled molten behind Drogon's teeth. He climbed, handed her to Black Sun, then climbed again, each wingstroke stretching tendons. Wind howled. He reached nape of clouds, turned, and folded wings. The dive drilled silence to a whistle, then roar. He felt lens heat scrabble for him, but inertia outpaced beam. At last instant, he spread wings, breaking to near stillness, throat furnace vomiting torrent of black scarlet flame concentrated onto flagship's masthead. Shields flashed, buckled, shattered. Flame bored through wood, iron braces, deck seams. Pitch stores beneath erupted. Ship blistered like rotten fruit. Lens shattered, shards whirling murderous. One skewered helmsman through visor. But triumph cost. 2 skirmisher boats flanked, bolts launching. One shard-tipped missile scraped Drogon's right thigh, releasing spray of liquid agony that hissed on contact. Some alchemic brew. Pain burned cold hot. He bit back roar, swerved skyward. Meanwhile, Crimson Daughter coiled back round, incinerating skirmisher. Black Sun landed with youngest on volcanic islet. He spanned wings over her damaged membrane, shielding from strays. Drogon regrouped, calling cease once flagship, listed ablaze. Remaining ships clustered in defensive crescent, horns wailing retreat, but bolts still fired sporadic. They could annihilate fleet, but risk remained. Wounded youngest needed salve and calm. His own thigh bled. Drogon ordered withdrawal. They vanished into cloudbank, leaving sea hissing with burning pitch, and men shrieking. On islet youngest winced while Drogon inspected wound. Membrane torn but not through nerve. Acid scorched, but tears diluted potency. Drogon laved wound with heated spit and ash. Old healer trick. She licked his muzzle gratefully, eyelids drooping. Their clash rang beacon loud. Whoever directed Voidlords now moved pawns across board of sea. Drogon's brood no longer anonymous threat, but target in grander calculus. He considered again Khar Fesnar's egg and blind figure. They might prove ally, foe, or bystander soon enough. He dispatched Crimson and Black to patrol, then lofted alone, tracing memory to Glass Dome Island. This time figure rose standing as Drogon approached, nebula eyes swirling deeper hues. I felt the clash. Scaled Titan. The covenant of quiet stars. Laments needless blood. Yet I know predators circle. The egg quickens faster for every violent ripple. Its yolk could shepherd calm or storm, depending on hands around it. Drogon shared scent thought of Yerxares, the shard, anchor, burden, and battle with warships. Figure listened, then extended palm. Within floating droplet of magenta light condensed into miniature whirlpool, an embryo of storm rippling. Bind egg to the anchor and storms may harmonize, but bear truth. If dragon of shard fails, egg devours sea kingdoms to hatch itself. Choose when courage peaks. Drogon bared fangs in half snarl, half question. Figure bowed slight. I speak only possibilities. Threads intertwine. Scissors of fate hide in clouds. He left uneasy, carrying memory of swirling droplet. Back in Caldera youngest slept. Membrane began to knit with Black Sun's gentle flame forging leather edges. Drogon called counsel. Crimson flicked tail impatience. Black's gaze thoughtful. Drogon laid out figure's claim. Merge egg's power with Yerxares to ease load and govern storms. Crimson chuffed excitement. a new sibling of unimaginable power. Black-voiced caution. Unknown egg parentage, risk of override. Drogon weighed. Silver Sun's anchor would grow heavy, any relief vital. Yet anchor plus egg could birth ungovernable pair if alignment soured. He stared at horizon where Stormheart Beacon glimmered faint even days away. Decision would not wait forever. Egg already cracked inside domed womb. He rumbled choice. They would escort egg to Yarxaris, but secure means to break or shield it if harmony failed. First step. Acquire egg. Figure had not refused gift, but test likely. They prepared. Youngest insisted join despite healing. Drogon allowed under close wing. At dusk, they landed near dome. Figure greeted, palm uplifted. Magenta droplet expanded into life-size sphere around petrified egg, separating it from pool. Your conviction shapes path. To take egg is to ink contract with tides. 2 tasks follow. Ferry safely and temper flame with soul songs lest shell fracture and root. Will you sing? Dragons do not sing as men, but their harmonics weave invertebrate vibrations that shape flame tongues. Drogon recalled cradle songs. Daenerys hummed atop Dragonstone. Melodies that lulled hatchlings. He opened throat, produced low resonance. Crimson harmonized high keens. Black contributed bass drone. Youngest added tremolo timid. Dom's glass quivered. Magenta sphere brightened swirling calmer. Figure nodded. Song accepted. The sphere shrank to size manageable under Drogon's forelimbs. Its weight surprised. Dense as moonstone, yet not inert. Pulses hammered his chest like second heart. They departed under starlight, sphere cradled. Flight proved taxing. Magenta field bled warmth that countered lift, forcing Drogon to flap more. Storm remnants along route stirred as if recognizing unborn kin. Crosswinds whipped. The brood formed diamond pattern, lending slipstream. They clung to upper thermals, where air crisp but less violent. On second night, as they camped on ridge above steaming marsh, sphere flickered violet and egg emitted dull thump. First heartbeat. Youngest jerked awake, startled. Crimson touched shell with nose, eyes wide. Drogon felt heartbeats sync with his for moment, then jar loose. If rhythm mismatched Arxaris flux, tether could shred both. At dawn, war drummed behind. Horizon dotted with black motes, more ships, now 20+ hulks. Above them glided silhouette of colossal bat-winged machine. Rune turbines whining. Fleet faster than wind, via artificer cunning. Drogon cursed. Battle now risked egg. He chose evasion. Island chain offered labyrinth passes of obsidian arches. They navigated slots. Shadows cloaking, but turbines scouted. Bronze drones fanned ahead. Black sun roasted pair, but third latched onto egg sphere, injecting filaments that crawled like wireworms. Sphere dimmed. Heartbeat sputtered. Crimson sliced and hammered drone away. Sphere regained glow, yet stress cracks spidered translucent field. Ships launched sky ballistae. Rune bolts arced overhead while turret machine fired concussive pulses that bent air. One bolt met basalt arch. Shattering avalanche across channel behind dragons. Water geysered. Drogon banked into narrow slot. Scraped wingtip. They emerged into wide gulf, just as fleet closed choke point, isolating them from north routes. No turning. Stormheart Beacon flickered ahead but still distant. Egg cracked once more, releasing magenta mist trailing behind. Drogon sensed desperate measure. Call upon Yarxaris now. Draw him here. He roared mind cry across tether, image of gulf, threat, egg. Unsure if distance permitted but hope clung. They climbed high, using altitude to swoop across gulf. Bolts chased. One grazing Crimson's tail. Scoring molten line. She shrieked, but held. Younger daughter tucked tight, still healing. 15 breaths later, horizon split. Blue-white pillar lancing sky. Descending. Yarxaris streaked like comet. Chain tether shimmering but stretched impossibly far. Perhaps borrowed slack from newly calmed cornerstone. He barreled toward fleet, shard chest blazing. First his aura touched sea. Water boiled, rising a steam wall that blanks sight. Into fog he plunged, tail whipping, unleashing shards that sliced hulls from keel to deck. Crystal spears erupted along waterline. Ships cracked open, disgorging men into froth. Turbine craft pivoted, directing sonic cannons. Waves thudded Xerxes, but he shrugged. Egg inside sphere pulsed at his approach. Heartbeat aligning tempo. Magenta to blue. Cracks on shell sealed faint. Drogon dove, placing sphere near Xerxes' claws. Contact sparked swirl of colors, azure and violet braiding. Silver dragon winced yet smiled with eyes. He enveloped sphere, bonding song pitch. Sphere quieted. Shrink wrapping around egg and shard aura. Tether chain to hub glowed incandescent. Tugging Xerxes landward. He had come too far. Equilibrium demanded return. He roared command, escort. Crimson and black strafed last skybolts. Youngest guarded flank. Drogon flank Xerxes opposite side, supporting load as they ascended. Chain whined but held. Fleet wreckage burned behind. Turbine craft lost lift, spiraled down snuffing. Ocean stank of pitch and fear. Flight to hub stretched hours. Xerxes' strength flagged, each beat slower. Drogon nudged sphere, sharing furnace warmth. Song continued though throats dried. At last, blue beacon blossomed beneath. Anchor plateau, intact. Xerxes folded atop hub dais. Sphere settling before him. Chain slack coiled around pedestal. Runes accepted bond. He breathed ragged, but flux remained stable. Egg heartbeat synchronized to shard glow, now alternating blue-magenta. Crack lines etched shell runes into likeness of dual dragon entwined. Blind figure awaited on dais edge, robes wafting. Fusion near, yet tempering incomplete. Final chord requires flame of lineage. Dragon Queen's ashes call. Drogon startled. Daenerys' remains lay in Valyrian ruin courtyard, guarded by fractured stones and ghosts. Journey back. But time pressed. Egg quickened. Blind figure gestured. The ashes live in you, great Drogon, mingled in early grief fire. Gift lies in marrow. Spill a breath upon shell and covenant seals. Understanding hollowed Drogon's chest. A part of his own fire born from last pyre that consumed bodies of Khal and Witch, from funeral that hatched Drogon himself. Daenerys had touched that flame again in death voyage to Valyria. His furnace carried particles of her, char woven into soul. He bowed, placed muzzle to sphere, and exhaled. Not scorched warfire but gentle thermal flux. Intimate exhalation scented with grass seas and salt of far marine. Magenta and blue swirled, reigniting into aurora. Shell melted into pearlescent mist, revealing wormling coiled inside. Scales black-silver. Crests tipped rose. It opened eyes of violet-blue starburst, reflecting father and anchor brother. It emitted bleat. Soft. Questioning. Anchor link split. One strand remained binding Xerxes to hub. Second curled to hatchling, stitching trio. Weight eased on Xerxes. Glow dimmed to sustainable pulse. He sighed relief. Wings settling. Hatchling tottered toward Drogon, nuzzled nose. Drogon's heart thundered. New life fused of storm and queen. Blind figure bowed. Balance restored. For now. But horizon still harbors scourge unused. Void Lord fragments. Skeletal fleets, automatons of Serpent Star. Teach hatchling harmony, lest shard bonds twist. And know this. Some among men will choose reverence, others revenge. You are architects of tomorrow's myth. Crimson Daughter landed beside hatchling, chirping delight. Black Sun, inspected, protective. Youngest, healed, crooned lullaby as winds calmed. Above them, sun lowered, painting sea mirror gold. Drogon gazed at children, one forged of war and sacrifice, one newborn hope, 3 stalwart siblings, and imagined Daenerys' smile across water sheen. He roared then, vast and resonant, carrying over silent fleet graveyards, echoing off ruined Valyrian cliffs, ringing into courts of distant kings. A roar not of conquest, but proclamation. The world had changed, dragons once more curated its storms, and this dawn, at least, belonged to fire made gentle by love.